Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Yuna and this is my channel where I talk about books. Today I wanted to talk about a genre or category of books that I don't highlight too often on my channel, and that is YA books. Now listen, I may, against my own will, be a full-grown tax-paying adult, but I still enjoy young adult stories. It's just that for myself, I've found that as I've aged and changed, I'm reaching for YA books less often or being a bit pickier about the YA books I'm picking up, or just finding that the ones I pick up aren't always hitting the way I want them to. Now, none of this is to say that you can't be a 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old and have YA still be your favorite genre. That is totally your prerogative, and I love that for you. I just think that by nature of YA books being meant for a younger audience, they're meant to be digestible by teenagers, by young adults. And so I think sometimes the way that themes are explored or narrative structures, they're just explored in a sometimes simpler way than I might find in an adult literary fiction book. I also just find that the way that relationships can sometimes be written, whether they're romantic or platonic, they just have this sort of teenage drama to them that makes total sense for the genre, but sometimes doesn't work for me. Obviously, I'm making this video because I think YA can still be a ton of fun and still be really impactful and still talk about really important themes and subject matter. I feel like some people might get prickly when I say this, but it is not at all meant to be an insult when I say that they aren't meant to be as complex or dense. That's not to say they can't be impactful or important or emotional or explore topics that are incredibly relevant to today's society and adults in today's society. It's just that if I open the cover of many of these books, it says it's for ages 13 or 14 and up. So these books have to be readable and digestible and understandable for an audience of 14-year-olds. Of course, 14, 15, 16-year-olds can be incredibly intelligent and emotionally sensitive and aware readers and people, but I think we can't deny that books that are written with the intent of being read by people who are 14, 15, they're just written differently than those that are meant for adult readers who have developed more critical reading skills, who have had more life experiences, and are able to read books with a certain amount of nuance. I'm just saying I recognize that I am no longer the target audience for young adult novels. It's just extra exciting when I find a YA book that I love. Now that I've put you through that long-winded intro, I'm going to be sharing my list of young adult books that I have read in recent years as an adult that I have absolutely adored. Of course, I'll go through them one by one, but these are books that generally I feel like in terms of prose, in terms of character work, in terms of themes and world building are all well written, well developed, well executed books. I'm going to start off with a series that will be no surprise to anybody who's watched my favorite books of 2025 video, and that is the Raybearer duology and The Maid and the Crocodile, all by the incredible Jordan Ifueko. These three books are set in the same universe, and while The Maid and the Crocodile can be read as a standalone, I would highly, highly, highly suggest that you pick up Raybearer and Redemptor and read this duology first, because there are big spoilers for this duology in The Maid and the Crocodile. Can we just have a moment of silence and appreciation for these covers? These are the UK covers of the books, and I went out of my way to get them, like I said in a previous video, because I just thought that they were so freaking stunning. I don't know if you can tell, but in these two, there are faces in the foiling in between the animals. And for this one, there's a teeny tiny little lizard that's on her shoulder. Can you see that? If you can't see this teeny tiny lizard, I'm going to insert a photo later because it's just so freaking cute and I need people to recognize it. This series follows Tarisai, who is a young girl who's been raised in isolation by her mother, and she comes of an age and her mother basically tasks her with befriending and assassinating the crown prince. Tarisai lives in this African-inspired fantasy world, this empire of Aritsar. In Aritsar, the king or prince has a council made up of 11 members. Those members are chosen at childhood and bonded to the prince through a power called the Ray. It's a magical power that bonds them closer than blood, and they're able to do things like, I believe, talk to each other telepathically, feel each other's emotions, and they grow up together and are a form of protection and strength for the ruler. So Tarisai is essentially tasked with becoming one of the council members for the crown prince and then killing him. I highly recommend this duology for anyone of any age. I think it tackles a lot of heavy and important topics that young people and adults should be exposed to, such as asexuality, relationships with toxic parents, intimate platonic relationships, power dynamics. There's just a lot that happens in these books. And once you finish this duology, you should absolutely pick up The Maid and the Crocodile. The Maid and the Crocodile, I believe, takes place 10, maybe 20 years after the end of the Raybearer duology, and it follows a new main character, Sade, small Sade. It's spelled S-A-D-E, and I can't remember if it's Sadie or Sade, but I'm gonna say Sade. I hope that's right. Sade is an orphan who has come to the capital of Artsar to try to find a place for herself and make a life for herself. She has both vitiligo and she has a crushed, injured foot that can make it hard for her to get around. She also has a magical power that allows her to see and remove curses from physical places. Bad energy manifests for her in the form of what she calls spirit silt, or essentially bad dust, and she can clean that dust and remove that bad energy and curse from a location and help it thrive. While she is trying to use her power to find work and a place for herself, she becomes entangled with this figure called the Crocodile, who is a cursed god. This book gets compared to Howl's Moving Castle, or people say it has a bit of a Howl's Moving Castle vibe, I guess because of Sade being a cleaner and also the crocodile being the sort of magical stealer of hearts type of character. But I would say this book absolutely stands completely on its own. If people didn't say it reminds them of Howl's Moving Castle, I don't know that that would have come up for me. Much like the Raybearer duology, The Maid and the Crocodile incorporates a lot of very important, relevant topics for young people and adults to think about. Topics such as disability justice, class-based oppression, labor rights, revolution, and the power of the working class. And all of those complex topics are expertly woven into the stories with Ifueko's incredible prose. She makes you believe that you are smelling the smells, you are feeling the textures, you are touching the fabrics, you are eating the foods. Just so beautifully evocative and descriptive and engaging prose in these books. And the characters are also multidimensional and believable and lovable. The world building is incredibly natural and organic and sucks you right in. I would go so far as to say that the Raybearer duology and The Maid and the Crocodile are my favorite YA books that I have read in the last 10 years. They're incredible and I absolutely suggest you pick them up. Next, I have another series, and I actually only have the third book in the series because I read the first two from the library, but representative of the Legendborn series, I have Oathbound here, which is the third book. The Legendborn cycle follows our main character, Bree Matthews, who is a high school student who recently lost her mother in a tragic accident. She is visiting the University of North Carolina for a program for, I guess, high-achieving high school students. And while she is there, she becomes involved with a secret society made up of descendants of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. She realizes pretty quickly that the society is somehow involved with her mother's death, and she basically infiltrates them to try and get answers and figure out what exactly happened. And through doing that, she makes a whole bunch of discoveries, meets a whole bunch of people, and goes on a wild ride. The story incorporates Southern Black traditions and spiritual practices, root magic, and explores themes of grief, racism, legacy, and it also has a love triangle, which I'm not always the biggest fan of teenage love triangles, but it's a fun one. And no matter what, I'm Team Bree. This has some more of those typical YA urban fantasy elements like brooding boys in dark leather outfits, but I just think it's such a fun time. I do have some criticisms about things like world building. I think that sometimes it can be a bit info dumpy and clunky, and I do think that some of the pacing got a bit awkward in this third book, but overall I'm really enjoying the series. I'll absolutely be getting the last book whenever it comes out. Tracy Dion, please have mercy and release the fourth book soon because I have questions. The end of this book is a huge cliffhanger. Now for a YA book with a slightly different vibe, I have Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrews. Your Blood, My Bones is a dark fantasy, dark modern fantasy with horror elements. This story follows a teenage girl named Wyatt Westlock who at the start of the book has returned to her old family farm with the intention of burning it to the ground. She intends to destroy the farm, but in the basement she finds her old childhood friend Peter chained up and abandoned. This isn't really a spoiler, this is all information you would find on the dust jacket, but Wyatt discovers that Peter is actually kind of immortal and her family has been killing him repeatedly and forcing him to be reborn in these ritualistic sacrifices in order to ward off some sort of evil. Peter knows that in order to break free from this very painful and endless cycle of death and rebirth, he has to end Wyatt's family line and kill her. From there, the story unfolds as there is this strange evil darkness in the woods around her farm that is slowly encroaching. There's also the introduction of a third character, James, who was incredibly close childhood friends with both Wyatt and Peter. And I'm just incredibly weak for close friend groups who are just in love with each other and take care of each other. It's a trope or dynamic that will get me every time. One of the reasons that Your Blood, My Bones stood out to me is that I find that many books, YA or adult, when they're going for a haunted, eerie, broken sort of vibe, they can very easily overstep into being overly angsty and overwrought in a way that I don't personally enjoy. Kelly Andrews does such an incredible job in this book of showing a lot of restraint while still being able to craft this very eerie and haunting sort of writing and atmosphere. I loved it. I ate that up. I thought her writing was so beautiful without being over dramatic. I will give a disclaimer for new readers of Kelly Andrews. This was the first book that I picked up by her, and she has two other books, which I have here, The Whispering Dark and I Am Made of Death. So all three of those books are generally marketed as standalone novels, but in fact, they all happen in the same universe. And I would argue that to get the full effect or full impact of the books, you should be reading them in publication order. Your Blood, My Bones was published after The Whispering Dark. And in Your Blood, My Bones, there is this extended section where the main characters of this book show up and have a cameo. If you don't know who those characters are or what they're talking about, you're just like, oh, who are these random characters that have shown up and are talking about things I don't understand? That's not to say that you can't read this book first, but I think to get the full effect, you should read The Whispering Dark first, then Your Blood, My Bones, and then finish it up with I Am Made of Death. Of the three books, Your Blood, My Bones is my personal favorite. So if you're only going to read one, I would say read this one. It's just that I think it makes more sense in the context of the other books. And if you are interested in I Am Made of Death, I actually think this book makes almost no sense if you don't read the other ones. So if you are interested in this, please read the other two first. But I digress. I've gone on a tangent. Back to Your Blood, My Bones. This book can be read as a standalone. Just know that you may not understand certain aspects of it without the context of the first book, but it is an incredibly beautifully written book with characters and relationships that I ended up really rooting for, an atmosphere that is dark and eerie and just sucks you right in, and a beautiful, evocative writing style that is measured and doesn't go overboard. Another standalone that I read recently and really enjoyed was The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley, not sure. This one is a crime mystery thriller novel with a main character named Donis Fontaine, who is a biracial, unenrolled Ojibwe teenager who is currently feeling sort of caught between worlds. After witnessing a murder, she becomes involved in a government investigation into crime and corruption that is currently affecting her community. As she gets more involved and as the investigation gets more complicated, she realizes that she and the people around her are more deeply involved with the crime and the corruption than she had expected. I thought the way that the Ojibwe culture was interwoven into the story was so beautifully done. Things like the language, the traditions, the practices, the worldviews, they were just written into the experiences and the relationships, and that was very lovely to read. The book doesn't shy away from discussing some of the complex issues facing Indigenous communities today, things like drug addiction, exploitation, tribal affiliation, and identity. As such, it does have some pretty dark subject matter, so I would suggest checking the trigger warnings if you're worried about anything like that. Even though I had some minor criticisms with things like pacing or characterization, at the end of the day, I had a great time, and I think it's a really important book that highlights a really important community, and I would highly recommend you pick this up. Last on my list is a book that took me completely by surprise. I got it as an ARC from NetGalley and had heard nothing about it prior. I was just scrolling through the website and I saw the cover, which looked really cool, and I saw that it was written by a Korean author, so I decided to give it a chance, and I absolutely love this book. And that is And the River Drags Her Down by Cheon Yoon. This is another dark YA with horror elements and even some body horror. The story follows Sujin, who's a young Korean girl, in the wake of the drowning of her older sister, Mire. Fun fact, Mire means future in Korean. So her sister recently drowned and passed, and her mother also passed away when she was younger, leaving Sujin living in the small town with her dad, who, although he loves her, has become depressed and distant and doesn't spend that much time with Sujin. Where the horror starts to come in is that Sujin and the women in her family have this inherited power to bring back animals and people from the dead using their body parts. Sujin is deep in grief over the loss of her sister, and she ends up using that power to bring her sister back. After a brief period of joy and reunion, she realizes that the sister she's brought back is changed, is strange, and is not quite herself. The rest of the story follows the consequences of Sujin's decision to bring Mire back, and I was just absolutely in love with the way that the author incorporated aspects of Korean culture and traditions and our ways of honoring our ancestors into the story. It was so beautiful, and I don't get to see it very often, so obviously it was very welcome. The story and the characters were part of an exploration of themes such as grief, of isolation, abandonment, of memory, of the way that intense grief and resentment can corrupt the things that you love, of generational trauma and generational power, family. The writing itself is beautifully haunting and measured and evocative and poetic, and I wasn't surprised at all to find out that Ji Eun-yoon is actually originally a poet, or she has a published book of poetry. The writing is exquisite. It is very, again, lyrical and poetic without being overdone or over dramatic. It has this atmospheric quality. It has this undercurrent of sadness. It's just beautiful. Another thing that I really appreciated about this book is that the themes and messages are delivered with a level of subtlety that I don't think you always see in YA books. Like I said earlier in the video, young adult books are often targeting audiences as young as 14 years old, and that just means that sometimes the messages or themes have to be a bit more explicit. For example, I think in Firekeeper's Daughter or the Legendborn cycle, the themes around racism are more explicitly delivered. And that doesn't mean that makes them less impactful or that that's bad writing. I just think that that's knowing your audience for YA books. But since I am an adult reader, I just appreciated that in this book, Ji Eun chose to take the route of more subtlety and leave room for the reader to take the plot and the characters and what's happening in the book and distill that into a message for themselves. I enjoyed that experience. So if you're looking for a horror YA book with beautiful, poetic, lyrical, measured writing and some aspects of Korean culture, I highly recommend And the River Drags Her Down by Ji Eun-yoon. This was an absolute surprise for me, and I'm so glad that I gave it a chance. That was my list of top recommended YA books that I've read recently as an adult and very much enjoyed. I am going to throw some honorable mentions up and not talk about them for too long. I have the series, but I don't feel like holding it up. So first I have The Hunger Games. Still very relevant, well written, very enjoyable. I think that the original series is the strongest. I've read the 2 prequels, and while I enjoy the Haymitch prequel more, I just think that the original series is the bread and the butter of this world. Second honorable mention goes to a series I mentioned in my video where I talk about books I want to reread, and that is The Raven Cycle. Again, I have not read this book in over 10 years, so I don't really know if it stands up or if I still enjoy it, but I'm going to recommend it because at the time that I read it, I did really enjoy it. Alright, well, thank you for listening to me talk about YA books. If you have any YA favorites, especially if you think that I might like them based on everything I've talked about, please leave the titles below. I don't read as much YA as I used to, but I still love YA books, and I would be more than happy to check out any recommendations you have. Thank you once again for listening to me ramble. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.